History has a habit of disappearing. Not all at once, but little by little. A forgotten name, a missing page, a ruined monument whose builders are no longer remembered. Entire civilizations can vanish this way, until eventually all that remains are the places they left behind. For nearly 3 decades, millions of players have explored the world of Spyro the Dragon. They've crossed its bridges, climbed its towers, collected its treasure, and rescued the dragons who called it home. But beneath every adventure, a much older story has quietly waited to be discovered. Who built these kingdoms? Why were there 5 dragon families instead of 1? Who carved the first magical portals? How long had dragon civilization existed before Spyro was born? The truth is, the games never answer these questions, not directly, and perhaps that's what makes them so fascinating. This is not the story of everything we know. It is the story of everything we can discover. We'll follow the evidence. We'll separate fact from theory. And whenever history falls silent, we'll let mystery remain. Because sometimes the most honest answer is simply, we don't know. Today we're going to investigate one of the biggest unanswered questions in Spyro lore. We'll start with what the games officially tell us, then examine the clues hidden throughout the trilogy, separate canon from fan theories, and finally build the most evidence-based explanation for how the Dragon Realms may actually work. All visuals in this video are original AI-generated art inspired by the series. Welcome to the Spyro Chronicles. Episode 1. The Mystery of the Dragon Realms. Chapter 1. A world that forgot its own history. The easiest mistake to make is believing the Dragon Realms were built for Spyro. They weren't. By the time his story begins, this civilization is already ancient. Not ancient because the games tell us it is, but because the world itself does. Look closely. These bridges weren't built overnight. Neither were these castles or these temples. Generations of dragons shaped this landscape, stone by stone, road by road, tower by tower. Environmental storytelling is one of the original Spyro's greatest strengths. Without a single history lesson, the game quietly tells us something important. These aren't levels, they're homes. Someone carved every statue, someone planted every tree, someone decided exactly where every bridge should cross every river. None of it exists by accident. According to the original game's instruction manual, 5 dragon families lived across 5 dragon worlds. The artisans, the peacekeepers, the magic crafters, the beast makers, and the dream weavers. That small detail changes how we see everything. These weren't simply themed locations created for gameplay. They were living cultures, distinct communities, 5 different ways of building the same civilization. And this raises our first mystery. Why 5? Not 4, not 6. 5. The games never explain why dragon society divided this way. Were these ancient bloodlines, occupations, schools of philosophy, separate nations that eventually united? We aren't told, but history often begins not with answers, but with the right questions. Whatever separated these families, something greater united them. Trade crossed these lands. Knowledge crossed these lands. Magic crossed these lands. They did not live beside one another. They lived with one another. For years. Perhaps generations. Long enough that peace no longer felt remarkable. It simply felt normal. And history has taught us something about civilizations that begin believing peace is permanent. They often stop imagining what could threaten it. While the Dragon Realms celebrated another ordinary day, history was already changing. Not here, not yet. But somewhere beyond the horizon, someone the dragons believed was part of their past was quietly preparing to become their future. Chapter 2. 5 families, 1 civilization. If you want to understand a civilization, don't begin with its rulers. Begin with its builders. Because what a people choose to build reveals what they believe will last. The artisans are often remembered simply as artists. But look closer. Artists don't build bridges. Artists don't design cities. Artists don't raise castles that survive generations. The artisans were something much greater. They were architects of civilization. Every carefully placed stone, every carved pillar, every flowering courtyard suggests a people who believed beauty had value beyond practicality. This was not a kingdom struggling to survive. It was a kingdom confident enough to create. And perhaps that's the greatest sign of lasting peace. When a civilization begins investing more effort into tomorrow than into defending today. History leaves us our first mystery. Why did the artisans build so much? For themselves? For future generations? Or perhaps because creation itself had become part of dragon identity? The games never answer, but the question matters, because civilizations often become remembered not for what they destroyed, but for what they built. If the artisans built beauty, the peacekeepers built security. Their homeland is unlike any other. Walls, fortresses, defensive towers, every structure seems designed to protect something. But protect it from whom? That's the mystery. The original game never tells us the dragon realms were at war. Quite the opposite. The instruction manual describes years of peace between the dragon families. So why prepare for conflict that apparently never came? Perhaps the peacekeepers understood something every civilization eventually forgets. Peace does not protect itself. Someone must choose to stand watch. The greatest defenders are often those history barely remembers, because when they succeed, nothing happens. The danger never arrives. The peacekeepers may represent exactly that. A civilization so well protected its people eventually forgot why protection was necessary. Some civilizations accumulate wealth, others accumulate knowledge. The magic crafters appear to have dedicated themselves to understanding the impossible. Floating islands, enchanted architecture, ancient portals, power beyond ordinary explanation. Everything here asks the same question. How much of dragon civilization depended upon magic rather than technology? We don't know, but the evidence surrounding us suggests something remarkable. Magic wasn't treated as a miracle, it was treated as a discipline, something to study, to refine, to master. Knowledge leaves a different kind of monument. Not stone, not treasure, but understanding. Perhaps every civilization needs people willing to ask difficult questions, long before anyone else realizes those questions matter. Of all 5 dragon families, the Beastmakers may be the most misunderstood. Their world appears untamed, wild, even dangerous. But perhaps that's exactly the point. Where the artisans shaped the land, the Beastmakers adapted to it. Civilization does not always mean conquering nature. Sometimes it means learning how to live beside it. Their homes rise with the forest, not against it. Their settlements breathe with the swamp, rather than replacing it. The original game never tells us why they are called Beastmakers. Many theories exist, none are confirmed. And perhaps that's another reminder that history often preserves names, long after it forgets their meaning. And then there are the Dream Weavers. Even today they remain one of the greatest mysteries in Spyro's world. Were they guardians of dreams? Masters of illusion? Scholars of the mind? The games never tell us. Instead, they invite us to wonder. Everything about this kingdom feels different. Perspective shifts, gravity bends. Stars seem close enough to touch. It is less a place and more an idea. Perhaps every civilization needs dreamers. Not because dreamers solve today's problems, but because they imagine tomorrow's possibilities. The peacekeepers protected, the magic crafters discovered, the beastmakers adapted, the dream weavers imagined. 5 different philosophies, 5 different strengths, 1 civilization. And perhaps that is why the dragon realms endured for so long. No family needed to become everything, because together they already were. History rarely destroys great civilizations overnight. First, it asks a quieter question. What weakness have they forgotten? The dragon realms had beauty, knowledge, strength, wonder, imagination. But somewhere beyond everything they had built, someone had spent years studying something entirely different. Not how to create, but how to conquer. And before long, those 2 worlds would collide. Chapter 3. A Civilization Connected. Civilizations are remembered for their monuments, but monuments don't hold civilizations together. Connections do. Roads, trade, ideas, travel. Without them, even the greatest kingdoms eventually become strangers. The Dragon Realms appear to have understood this remarkably well. Because despite their differences, the 5 dragon families never seem isolated. They seem connected. Look closely at Spyro's journey. He doesn't simply move from level to level. He follows a network. Balloonists carry him between dragon worlds. Portals carry him deeper into each kingdom. Every route suggests planning, organization, infrastructure. These dragons weren't wandering through scattered lands. They had built a civilization that knew how to stay connected. That might sound obvious, but it quietly changes how we see this world. The Dragon Realms weren't 5 isolated homes. They were neighbors. Chapter 4: The Mystery of the Portals. Now we arrive at one of the greatest mysteries in all of Spyro: the portals. They are everywhere, perfectly constructed, perfectly reliable, clearly ancient. Yet something very strange happens throughout the entire trilogy. No one ever explains them. Who built them? The games never say. How do they work? The games never say. How old are they? Once again, the games never say. History often treats everyday technology as ordinary. Think about roads. Most people never ask who built the first one. Perhaps the dragons felt the same way. Maybe the portals had existed for so long their origins had simply been forgotten. Or perhaps their creators were never dragons at all. Notice the wording: not impossible, simply unknown. And good history should always know the difference. Chapter 5: The Wealth of the Dragons. Then there are the gems. If you've played Spyro, you've probably collected thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, but stop for a moment. Ask yourself something. Why did the dragons possess so much treasure? Not a little, an astonishing amount. Entire vaults, hidden chambers, locked strongholds, enough to fill every corner of every kingdom. Why? The games never explain whether gems functioned as currency, or magical fuel, or symbols of status, or something else entirely. History remains silent, but then Gnasty changes everything. The original instruction manual reveals one remarkable detail. Gnasty transformed the dragon's treasure into his army. Think about that for a moment. The prosperity that allowed dragon civilization to flourish became the very resource used against it. Their greatest strength became someone else's weapon. History is filled with moments like this, where yesterday's blessing becomes tomorrow's vulnerability. Chapter 6: The Dragon Who Was Forgotten. Every civilization eventually decides who belongs, and who does not. Long before Spyro's adventure, the dragons made that decision. His name was Gnasty Gnorc. Here, history becomes frustrating. The original games tell us remarkably little about Gnasty before his exile. No childhood, no family, no kingdom, only fragments. According to the instruction manual, the dragons eventually banished him to a remote junkyard, a place they believed suited him perfectly. That single decision changed everything. The manual tells us something equally important. During his exile, Gnasty learned powerful magic. How? We don't know. Who taught him? We don't know. Where that magic came from? Again, we don't know. But history doesn't require every answer, only enough evidence to understand the outcome. And the outcome was catastrophic. While the Dragon Realms perfected peace, Gnasty perfected something else: patience. Years passed, perhaps many years. The dragons slowly stopped thinking about him, but he never stopped thinking about them. That may be the most dangerous difference between civilizations and the people they leave behind. One side moves on, the other never does. The dragons believed Gnasty belonged to history. Gnasty believed history hadn't started yet. Chapter 7: The Day History Stopped. If history could choose a disguise, it would probably choose an ordinary morning, because no one recognizes history while they're living through it. To the dragons, this day began like countless others before it. Work would continue, travelers would leave, builders would build, families would gather. Nothing suggested that this would become the last ordinary day the Dragon Realms would ever know. The original game begins with what seems like a harmless joke. A television interview, questions, laughter, friendly conversation. It's one of Spyro's most memorable openings, but viewed through the lens of history, it becomes something else entirely, because this interview preserves something precious. The final peaceful conversation before an entire civilization fell silent. The dragons spoke of Gnasty as though he belonged to the past. They mocked him, dismissed him, laughed at the idea that he could ever become a serious threat. Can we blame them? Perhaps not. From their perspective, they had already won. The troublemaker had been exiled. Peace had lasted for years. The danger appeared over. History often punishes civilizations not because they are cruel, but because they become certain. Chapter 8. The Spell. We don't know exactly how Gnasty's spell worked. The games never explain its mechanics, but we do know what it accomplished. In a single moment, it reached every dragon world. Not one village, not one family, all of them. The artisans, the peacekeepers, the magic crafters, the beast makers, the dream weavers, 5 families, 1 civilization, caught completely by surprise. Notice something remarkable. Gnasty didn't burn their cities. He didn't level their castles. He didn't destroy their roads. He removed their people. The buildings survived. The bridges survived. Even the treasure remained for a while. What disappeared was the civilization itself. This may be the greatest tragedy hidden inside Spyro's world. Nothing looked ruined. Everything looked abandoned. History had not been erased. It had been paused, waiting for someone to begin it again. Chapter 9. The Dragon Who Wasn't There. Then comes one of the oldest mysteries in Spyro. Why wasn't Spyro crystallized? The original instruction manual offers one explanation. Spyro had been playing hooky. He simply wasn't where the others were. The opening cutscene jokes that perhaps he was too small for the spell to affect him. Whether that's meant seriously or simply as humor, the game never confirms. What matters is something much simpler. For reasons history never fully explains, one dragon remained free. Imagine this moment, not as a player but as Spyro. Yesterday this was home. Today it is a museum. Every face he recognizes trapped. Every mentor silent. Every familiar voice gone. History had chosen the smallest dragon in the realm to carry the weight of everyone else. Not because he was destined. Not because he was chosen. Simply because he was still standing. This is the moment the future begins. Not when Gnasty casts his spell. Not when the dragons fall. But when someone decides their story isn't over. Civilizations are rarely rebuilt in a single victory. They begin with one person, one decision, one impossible step forward. And for the Dragon Realms, that first step belonged to Spyro. Chapter 10. One Dragon Against History. History has a habit of remembering the final battle, the last victory, the decisive moment. But civilizations are almost never restored that way. They return slowly. One village, one family, one life at a time. Spyro's greatest achievement wasn't defeating Gnasty Gnorc. Not yet. His greatest achievement was giving the Dragon Realms something they had lost. Hope. Every dragon rescued meant more than another voice returning. It meant another builder, another teacher, another guardian, another lifetime of knowledge restored. A civilization is never just its buildings. It is the people who remember how those buildings came to be. The games never show us these moments, but they invite us to imagine them. When the dragons were freed, their work did not simply end, it continued. The unfinished sculpture would one day be completed. The abandoned bridge would welcome travelers once more. The stories interrupted by Crystal would finally reach their ending. Sometimes history isn't changed by dramatic moments. Sometimes history continues because ordinary life is allowed to begin again. Chapter 11. Why Spyro? This brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. Why Spyro? Not why is he the main character, but why was he the one who succeeded? The older dragons possessed greater strength, greater wisdom, greater experience. Many had lived for centuries. Spyro had lived only a fraction of that time. So what did he have that they didn't? Perhaps the answer wasn't power. Perhaps it was perspective. The older dragons had spent generations building a stable civilization. Spyro had grown up inside it. He saw possibility where others saw routine, movement where others saw obstacles, adventure where others saw danger. The games never say this directly, but they quietly show us something remarkable. The youngest dragon in the kingdom adapted faster than anyone else. History rarely asks whether someone is ready. It simply arrives. And sometimes the future belongs to the one person who never had time to become afraid. Chapter 12. The Dragons Who Stayed Behind. There's another mystery hiding in plain sight, one almost every player has noticed. Why don't the rescued dragons accompany Spyro? It's an obvious question, and yet the games never answer it. Perhaps the crystal spell left them weakened. Perhaps they remained behind to protect their homes. Perhaps they believed Spyro had already become the best chance of reaching Gnasty. Or perhaps this is simply one of those questions history can no longer answer. For historians, admitting uncertainty is never a weakness, it's honesty. And honesty allows us to appreciate the evidence we do have, because one fact remains beyond question. Every dragon Spyro rescued trusted him to continue. That trust may have been the greatest gift they could give. Chapter 13. The Sixth World. The Dragon Realms were built around 5 dragon families. 5 worlds, 5 identities, 5 ways of seeing civilization. But at the edge of that civilization, there is a 6th world, not built by dragons, built by one dragon's greatest enemy, Gnasty's world. And perhaps no place tells us more about its ruler than the land he chose to create. Compare this place to the artisans. There are no sculptures, no gardens, no monuments. Compare it to the peacekeepers. No watchtowers protecting communities, only fortifications protecting industry. Compare it to the magic crafters. No libraries, no observatories, only workshops devoted to power. Every dragon family expressed its values through its world. Gnasty did exactly the same. Chapter 14. A Kingdom of One. There is another difference. The Dragon Realms were built by families. Gnasty's world appears built around one individual. Everything points toward him. His fortress, his machinery, his army, his rules, his name. Even the world itself bears it. Not Dragon World, not Gnorc Kingdom, Gnasty's world. History has seen leaders like this before. People who reshape entire nations into reflections of themselves. Whether Gnasty desired revenge, power, recognition, or all three. The games never tell us directly. What they do show is transformation. He did not simply want to defeat the dragons. He wanted to replace them. The original manual tells us he began transforming dragon worlds into Gnorc worlds. That single sentence reveals everything. This was never just an attack. It was an attempt to rewrite civilization itself. Chapter 15. 2 Visions of the Future. Throughout this journey, we've been asking what each dragon family valued. Now we can finally ask the same question about Gnasty. The artisans valued creation. The peacekeepers valued protection. The magic crafters valued knowledge. The beast makers valued harmony with the wild. The dream weavers valued imagination. Gnasty valued control. His army was created from stolen treasure. His empire from occupied lands. His power from imprisoning others. Where dragon civilization encouraged many voices, Gnasty's world echoed only one, his own. And now, the smallest dragon in the Dragon Realms stands before the largest challenge his world has ever known. Not merely a battle, a choice. Which vision of the future would survive? A civilization built together, or a kingdom built for one? Chapter 16. The Final Chase. The final confrontation between Spyro and Gnasty is unusual. Unlike many villains, Gnasty doesn't stand waiting for battle. He runs. Some players have always found that surprising, but perhaps it's fitting. For years, Gnasty had planned every detail of his conquest. Now, for the first time, someone else controlled the future. Spyro wasn't chasing revenge. He was chasing the last obstacle standing between the Dragon Realms and tomorrow. The games never linger on this moment. But perhaps we should, Because this is more than a hero confronting a villain. It is one civilization confronting another. One built through fear, one built through hope. One believing power is taken, the other proving it can be earned. History often remembers the moment an empire falls, but empires rarely end because of one final strike. They end when the ideas that built them can no longer survive. And with Gnasty's defeat, his vision for the Dragon Realms ended with him. The conquest was over. The dragons had reclaimed their home. But history wasn't finished, because the greatest question was never whether Spyro could defeat Gnasty. It was whether the Dragon Realms would remember what they had nearly lost. Chapter 17. What was really saved? History often celebrates the moment a villain falls. It remembers the battle, the victory, the hero. But history asks another question, one that's far more difficult. What happened next? The games never show us how the Dragon Realms rebuilt. They simply allow us to imagine it. The hammers would ring again, the bridges would welcome travelers once more, the workshops would fill with conversation, the songs of ordinary life would return. History rarely remembers these moments, and yet they are the moments that matter most. The Dragon Realms had survived, not because their cities were indestructible, not because their treasure was endless, not because their enemies were weak. They survived because enough people remained to remember who they were. Chapter 18. The mystery continues. And yet our journey ends where it began, with questions. Who built the first portals? How old are the Dragon Realms? What did the dragons know that history has forgotten? The original trilogy never answers every mystery. Perhaps it was never meant to, because mysteries have a curious way of keeping worlds alive. As long as there are questions, there are still discoveries waiting to be made. Today we explored the civilization that shaped Spyro's world. But civilizations are remembered through the people who lived within them. And among all the figures who walked the Dragon Realms, none would leave a greater mark than the dragon history almost overlooked. Gnasty Gnorc tried to erase a civilization. Spyro restored it. But their story was only the beginning. Because beyond the Dragon Realms, another world was waiting. Another mystery, another history, and another chapter in the story of Spyro. History is fragile. Kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall. Names are forgotten. Monuments crumble. But as long as someone is willing to remember, their story is never truly lost. Thank you for joining me on the first chapter of the Spyro Chronicles.